You should do that.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Thursday, July 11th, 2024 edition of the Iowa 911 Communications Council. Kara, could we please have a roll call of council members?
Sure. Chris Jasper.
Jasper's here.
Jeff Miller.
Here.
Mike Bryant.
Here.
Eric Daw. How about Tom Berger?
Tom Berger's here.
Thank you. John Snyder. John Snyder. I think he's on. Robbie Johannesson.
Here.
Rob Denner. Adam Well.
Here.
Taylor Teeple. Yep, that's one.
Okay, thank you. Could I please get a motion to approve today's agenda?
Jasper will motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Against, same sign. Approved. Also, could I get a motion to approve the June 13, 2024 minutes?
John Snyder will make that motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Jasper will second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, same sign. Motion carries. Blake, do we have a report?
Sure do. Let me get my slides. All right, I wanted to give everyone an update on some of the, specifically Clay County with the Northwest Iowa flooding that occurred over the last few weeks. Their physical PSAP was inundated with floodwaters fairly significantly to the point where they could no longer receive and dispatch 911 calls out of their PSAP. So working with DPS, as well as the local PD and sheriff's office, we did move the disaster recovery PSAP into the area. So that is the first time that that vehicle has actually taken 911 calls in a real disaster. So the intent of the vehicle is mobile command, but then if you remember, we put shared services capabilities in there for just this type of incident. So for 18 days, those folks, as well as DPS, took calls out of the mobile command vehicle, the disaster recovery PSAP. So recently, just earlier this week, they were able to rehabilitate their physical facility and reroute calls appropriately to the physical building. Luckily, none of the equipment was impacted from that flood. Some of the areas were. So once they cleaned out some of the areas that needed cleaned out and made sure the HVAC was working, we were able to get calls rerouted fairly easily. But it led to some interesting discussions. At one point, they had asked for some staffing assistance for telecommunicators, and we started working that with some of our recovery staff. Public safety in general is obviously really good at helping each other out, and that's awesome. However, when you start to think about some of that medium-term staffing requirement that could have been needed, obviously people want paid and agencies want reimbursed. So as much as I love the attitude of everyone just go to an area and help, there are some T's to cross and I's to dot to make sure folks can get reimbursed. So we started to have some of those conversations. Of course, this is a federally declared disaster. So what does that potentially look like? And there's definitely a pathway to get those folks reimbursed, be it a TERT team or deployment or an INTD deployment. But really the mechanism is either IMAC, a 2080 agreement, or any sort of MOU to document what the request is, going through your emergency management channels for that resource. So we didn't actually have to pull the trigger on that. Some of the communications in the area stabilized, and that was kind of the driving force behind that request. But it led to some good conversations that we had not really had before. All of those things are good ideas. Again, the TERT team, really good idea. But then the next step is, where are those people going to stay for a medium-term deployment? How does their agency get reimbursed with backfill staffing? All those questions started to get asked once we started to look towards people to actually respond. So we worked through some of those. So it was a good discussion. One of the moving to the next topic here, the work group on funding and 34A proposals for next legislative session continues to meet. I do think we are to the point where starting kind of the back half of this month and then the rest of the summer and into fall, we'll begin socializing those ideas from the work group, fine tuning what the proposal will be. So definitely more to come on that. But I think the work group is ready to kind of really start digging in and sharing those proposals and making sure everyone kind of knows what the plan is going forward into the legislative session. I sent out a reminder earlier this week on the statewide training portal, and I know Zetron will talk about this here in a couple slides. But as a reminder, this council, as well as our office, approved 9 months worth of online training for all telecommunicators and all PSAPs in the state. So that outreach has started, and I will be the first to admit the outreach initially kind of looked like spam. So I understand how it might have slid to the bottom of your email box. So I just basically sent that back out as a reminder. If you are interested in that, it is available at no cost to your agency or your telecommunicators. So please take a look at that email. I believe I sent it yesterday morning. So take a look at that. If you're interested, follow the instructions on the email. It's fairly self-explanatory. The next bullet there, we have had our initial touch base with the FCC regarding the Lumen outage on May 30th. At this point, I will just say that they are interested in our experience and what we had to share. We were able to provide them some documents such as network diagrams and contractual relationship documents. So next, they will most likely refer the matter over to the Enforcement Bureau. I have no idea what's going to come from that. We may hear something down the road, we may not. So that meeting again did happen. They were interested. I don't really plan on briefing it again unless we were to hear something back formally from the FCC on what the results of their investigation or findings may be. Finally, I sent out information on the long-awaited FCC report and order on NextGen 911 transition. So if you remember, this has been an open rulemaking proceeding now for about 12 to 18 months. Really what it started out as was looking at cost recovery on the wireline provider side. If you remember, in 2001, the FCC had a ruling on wireless cost recovery. And basically, in that ruling, that set the default as it's a cost of doing business for wireless providers. So this recent notice of proposed rulemaking looked at that from the wireline perspective. So next week on July 18th, they have a proposed report and order that the commissioners will consider at that meeting. And it does a couple things that are really important for continued NextGen 911 transition. It addresses what OSPs or originating service providers must deliver, where they must deliver it to, and who is responsible for the cost of that delivery. So not only does it address and set the default as it's a cost of doing business for the carriers, it also allows the 911 authority to say where those carriers must meet and in what format. So the format piece is really important. It allows us to get IP 911 calls into our network. The cost is also really important, and I think is probably most relevant to local jurisdictions. It basically sets the default as it's a cost of doing business for the carrier. Now, that does not preempt any local or state agreements. So if you have contracts, if somebody were to determine that 34A allows for cost recovery, this does not supersede anything that we have at the local or state level. But again, it kind of sets the default for it's a cost of doing business. It does provide for timelines associated with that. For more of the national carriers, it is a 6-month time frame. For the regional carriers, it is a 12-month time frame. So definitely more to come. Next week, we'll see what and if the commission actually passes the report and order, or if there's any changes, and then we'll kind of go from there. And I'm guessing that beep was a hand in the air. I'll go ahead and call on whoever raised their hand.
This is Jeff with Dubuque County. So does this mean that the wire or the IP based phone systems will now have a physical address associated with them in like the ALI database?
So the report and order would eventually touch some of the addressing, but it's not that part of it. It's the address would come in as part of the SIP header with the call, rather than the ALI DIP being a separate side process, if that makes sense.
Okay, that works.
Sounds good. Any other questions on the FCC proposed report and order on or wireline cost recovery? If not, I will continue on. So fiscal year 2024 has come to an end. Looking at the GIS grants that we dispersed over the course of the year, we were at 100% compliance for the entire year. So when you translate that into dollars and cents, it means we passed through 1.284 million in GIS grants. That's actually down from last year. That being said, we had 2 PSAPs close, and we do the GIS grants based on the number of PSAPs. So we had more PSAPs and counties meet the benchmarks, but because there's less PSAPs, there was less funding passed through. So again, really the bottom line is 100% compliance with the benchmarks. Everyone's meeting those, and we don't anticipate, or actually there is no change for the benchmarks in fiscal year 2025. They are exactly the same. 98% match rates for GIS data, 98% alley to road centerline, monthly uploads, and we will pay the grant out at the end of each quarter. So no changes going forward. I mentioned the end of the fiscal year. You can see the balance there on what we ended up spending. So we basically zeroed out the $100,000 for the previous fiscal year. We just left a little bit there that was not claimed. So, but that with the new fiscal year does mean that that fund replenishes itself. So there is $100,000 there and ready to be applied towards if anyone has any training applications they want to submit. There are none to consider this month. That concludes my portion of the briefing. I will turn it over to Lynn Warren with Zetron for an update on shared services.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
All right. We have actually late breaking news for program updates that Clinton County signed on last night. So we'll be adding them on. If you'd like to go to the calendar, we'll be adding them on as yellow. And that will give us 77 live PSAPs with 2 that are pending. Next slide, please. Blake already talked about the training portal. So the only update I have is that we are now at 20 agencies that have come on board, and anyone else that's interested can email Christy Wade at the email that is there. Next slide, please. As always, we have regular newsletters coming out. If anyone is interested in getting on the distribution list, just email me at lynn.warren@zetron.com. Are there any questions for me or Blake? Thank you.
And if there's no questions for me either, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Blake. We don't have any training fund requests. We'll move on to reports. Do we have any technical advisories? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to a report for the Iowa Statewide Interoperable Communication System Board, Ms. Nichols.
Okay, thanks, Chair Runner.
Just a reminder, we will not be having our regular meeting after this meeting that's been canceled for this month, and we'll meet again August 8th. We have the Story County Comex the week before the floods, ended that on June 20th with 20 trainees going through to get COMLs, COMTs, and INTDs. Pretty timely when the floods hit, and then that discussion began about the need for possible INTDs, I thought. So it was a really successful event. We had a huge influx of volunteers who came to help with that event. I just want to say a huge shout out to all of those people who evaluated the trainees, and also the agencies who sent volunteers to help in the SimCell situation. Just a huge number of people gave their time and expertise to that, and I can't say enough about it. Also, thanks to Story County who hosted. They gave up their pretty much their entire facility there. So this will be probably the last time I mention it. Maybe because a lot of people have heard me say that, but it was just really amazing. The people that showed up for that event, and then the state of Iowa building up that commune personnel, and then the immediate need that was shown that next weekend for that. So keep that in the back of your mind, how important those individuals in that training could be as these severe weather events continue in Iowa, and whatever may be on our horizon for those personnel needs. The SCIF update, I know we've been talking about that for a long time also, but we are in the final stages of that. We've made just some updates to the organization chart. So at our next D6 board meeting, actually, we'll see that final draft. And then the only other thing I was going to mention was that disaster recovery vehicle and all of the resources that have been deployed in those recent events that are available. Really, no matter if you happen to be a ISIX user or not, they're available across the state, and they can be deployed pretty much on a pretty quick basis. And then also, and Spencer FirstNet was deployed out, and those resources appeared in about a 3-hour time frame. They came from Colt came from South Dakota, and it was arrived in about 3 hours. So just be aware that resources are available and can show up. So if you find yourself, your agency find yourself in need of something, cash radios, ISIX site, or some sort of communication needs, reach out to myself, your emergency manager, and they should be able to help figure out some way to get those to you. So that's really all I have for today.
Okay, any questions? All right, thank you. All right, moving on, can we get an update from U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Security Agency, Mr. Myers?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to the 901 Council. Appreciate the time today, as always. Brief report this morning. We're talking about grant guidance to start, specifically with emergency communications equipment. The 2024 SAFECOM grant guidance was released on June 6th. This is updated annually and attempts to provide relevant information on updated policies, eligible costs, updates to technical standards, new best practices, and other things that may apply to emergency communications grants. All entities that are going to apply for these grants are encouraged to follow the recommendations in that document to ensure that the equipment purchased is resilient, interoperable, and will allow for effective emergency communications. Also, just keep in mind, grant recipients using DHS and FEMA funds for communications activities must comply with that guidance. If you're curious as to what is in it this year, you can go to our website, CISA.gov/SAFECOM/funding, and also CISA.gov/SAFECOM emergency comms grants list. That website is active and up and has the latest documents uploaded to it. Next slide, we're going to start to get into some technical advisories for this month. Perhaps most notably, was a recent update from the Department of Commerce on a Kaspersky ruling that just came out. On the next slide, it will actually go into kind of what is in that final determination. If you're curious to read the details, that case number is ICTS-2021-002. And this applies to the prohibited list of software items from Kaspersky that have been deemed to be a security concern to the government and private customers in the United States. There's a couple of appendices in that ruling that includes a lot of current products, but it is not considered exhaustive. You can read about it in the Federal Register, look up 2024-13532. There's also a complete list of device and software suppliers that are outlined in the list of secure equipment and services that are underneath Section 2 of the Secure Networks Act on the FCC's website, underneath their supply chain covered list section that includes other device manufacturers that are deemed to be security risk to interests in the United States. On the next slide, there is an update on an open SSH vulnerability. This one may seem a little weird to have here, but SSH is used in a lot of login processes that have been deemed to be secured in the past. This is something where someone has knowledge of what your system looks like, as they've done recon in the past. They may be able to exploit this to execute code on the system. That could be data exfiltration, it could be deployment of ransomware, it could be a number of things. The good news is there is a patch available to fix this through OpenSSH, so it's something to check with your service providers on if this is still applicable to your systems if you do use SSH. This and all the other known exploited vulnerabilities are listed in our catalog on CIS's website. You can also find a complete list of vulnerabilities from NIST at nvd.nist.gov. On the next slide, we'll talk about regional news of note really quick. Biggest thing coming up is Central States. The communications exercise is scheduled to take place in the Joplin Quapaw area from September 10th to 13th. That is a large communications exercise that we are supporting, and I believe we may have some attendees from Iowa as well that are slated to go down. And then finally, of course, interoperability markers will be updated in August. Those are the dates we're looking for targeted meetings. Some early notifications have been sent out to get those scheduled, and we will let the appropriate parties know once those are lined up. That's my report for the month, Mr. Chair. Go ahead and take any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, we don't have any committee reports. Anybody want to bring up anything legislatively? Okay, any information sharing by council members? Okay, I don't have any new business or old business or travel requests. So do we have any business from the floor from the folks in this room? All right, any business from those joining virtually? Okay, hearing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Joe Hannison.
All right, do I have a second?
Jasper will second.
Okay, all those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheriff.